Now, I'm sure you might have seen one of the most controversial clips going around on Twitter around Adi Odolipo and his take on George Foreman and marketability. I will play the clip in a sec, but first of all, I just want to say, look, I really like Adi as a presenter. I think he's very personable. I think he asks the right questions at times to the fighters, sometimes difficult questions as well. So this is no hate on him, and I think this is just more a knowledge gap within that time period in terms of George Foreman and his rise to the top. So in no way am I trying to hate on Adi, I'm hating the opinion. And it wasn't just Adi as well, it was also, I believe, Eubank's daughter that was in on it as well. So I guess let's get right into it and have a look. So before I get started, it's obviously Emily Eubank, who you see here on screen, and G-Man, and obviously Adi. And I think the clip is around marketability of a fighter. So yeah, I guess let's just get right into it.
It's almost like banging my head against the wall, this one.
What is marketability? Is it bums on seats? Is it someone that can sell pay-per-views? Is it someone that's got, in today's world, a bigger social media following? Does that even really mean anything when it comes to boxing?
Mm-hmm.
See, I think, and before we get onto the controversial take, I think Adi in particular is so caught up in the media world that he lives in right now. And he's comparing his worldview in terms of what he's used to, especially in the last 10 years within media. So maybe this is where his opinion is coming from. He's thinking about these things, social media numbers, not just outside the ring as well. I think he's kind of, who drives the most numbers, I guess, is a big thing for a lot of people these days.
Mr. George Foreman. George Foreman. No.
That's horrendous.
How?
That's horrendous.
Did you ever have a George Foreman grill?
No.
Did you?
I don't recall.
What, because he can sell grills, all of a sudden he can fight?
I think that's the bad bit, isn't it? I think that's the controversial thing that's really ticked off a lot of people, and maybe people are taking this out of context. Maybe he's like saying it in general, like if it was anyone that could sell a grill, does then that make them good at boxing? But obviously they're just talking about George Foreman, so it makes Adi look real bad, because George Foreman was a tremendous fighter. Especially, consider he was a Olympic gold medalist. He became one of the youngest heavyweight world champions at 24 years old, I believe, beating Joe Frazier, another Olympic gold medalist, along with being a world champion who had fought Ali. And not to mention, George had lots of really sneaky tricks, underrated tricks that people didn't really credit him for back then. On the eye, sometimes he looked a bit raw, or he looked like he didn't have the technical ability, but he certain, if you actually do your research and look into the techniques that he used, he was very effective. Sure, at points he would just throw haymakers, I agree, but he was a very clever fighter, and people don't give him enough credit, especially as his rise to the top and as heavyweight champion. And even when he made his comeback after that long layoff, he reinvented himself. That crossguard was a great way to adapt to modern boxing at the time. These other big hitters in the heavyweight division, and especially he was a slowing, aging man. He had to find ways to set up his punches. He couldn't just open up like he did before, so he reinvented himself. So this is where people have got ticked off around Adi, because George Foreman could definitely fight. And he could sell grills.
One of the biggest fights of all time, Rumble in the Jungle, Kinshasa Zaire, Muhammad Ali, George Foreman.
It's not in the top 10.
Excuse me.
It's not in the top 10 of, money-making pay-per-views.
Had it been today's market, it would have been.
And this is another thing that really ticks me off. They don't consider the time periods of when these massive fights were. Obviously back then in the 60s, 70s, even before, to watch these big fights, you had to go to the cinema, the theater, to watch it in a closed circuit. And it's very different to today's world, where you can just go on DAZN and buy the pay-per-view straight away off your phone. Even in the 80s and 90s, you had to call up a number to get the pay-per-view to watch these big fights. So it was just a very different time period, and it's very harsh to downplay the Rumble in the Jungle, because that is one of the biggest fight, if not the biggest fight of all time.
Muhammad Ali could have fought Joe Frazier there. He could have fought anyone. Ali, Boumaier. I'd never heard anything.
And another thing that's ticked me off, as soon as he says, because of Muhammad Ali, okay, in a way I actually do agree with Adi. Muhammad Ali, and I'm talking about at the time, he was a massive star. Obviously, what he did outside the ring, he came back into the sport. He wanted to be heavyweight champion. He was still mouthing off. He still had that charisma back then, which drew a lot of attention. He helped sell that fight, obviously. And the reason why that fight was so big was because no one thought Ali was going to win. But there was still that slight glimmer of hope for a lot of people that he might just do it. He might just prove us all wrong. But no one thought he was going to win. Look at the odds back then. Look at what the journalists were saying. No one thought he was going to beat George Foreman because George Foreman was knocking out everyone.
Muhammad Ali could have fought Joe Frazier there. He could have fought anyone. Ali, Boumaier. I never heard anything about Foreman.
I'm sorry, and this is where I disagree with Addy. Oh, he could have fought anyone. Sure, it would have been a big fight, but it wouldn't have been as big as George Foreman versus Muhammad Ali. That's just a fact in my eyes. Obviously, Joe Frazier was still a big name, so that doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, if Joe Frazier had fought in Zaire instead of George Foreman, obviously it was going to be a big fight because they had their rivalry, they had already fought. So, yeah, it makes no sense.
Ali, Boumaier. I never heard anything about Foreman.
Yeah.
That is all Muhammad Ali.
I think he became heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
Beat oldest heavyweight champion in history, mind you.
Yeah.
And they all wanted to fight George Foreman.
People forget this part of the story as well. Even in today, you know, it's crazy how people don't look into the history of some fighters.
And then they wanted to give it to Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan said no. George Foreman said, I'll take it. And he made more money from the grills than he did in boxing. There you go.
Yeah, which says...
And this is what I'm saying, you know, so obviously when George Foreman, he left the sport, he had that spiritual experience and then went and became a minister, I believe, or a pastor, sorry. And, you know, when he did come back, you know, 10 years later, obviously he was doing it he was running out of money. He had to make money somehow. So boxing, you know, was something he was good at. He decided to get back into it. But his whole character had changed, obviously because of what had happened to him, that spiritual awakening that he had. But at the same time, there was this mystique around him coming back. No way George Foreman could ever win a heavyweight world title again. Also, but then people were intrigued by the interviews he was giving. He wasn't the character he was in his 20s when he was boxing. You know, that stone cold killer approach. Now he was this friendly, bubbly character that had to market himself. He went on HBO, where boxing was still the biggest combat sport. This is before UFC. People were still tuning into HBO to watch these massive fights, and George Foreman is commentating while he was still fighting. He still took some massive fights back then. Obviously, he fought Evander Holyfield. That really, once again, rose his profile, and then obviously became the oldest heavyweight world champion. And, you know, he had his own he was on his own sitcom at one point. And then obviously, as G-Man just mentioned there, around the grills, there's a reason why they asked George Foreman after Hulk Hogan, because George Foreman was very much in the public eye back then. People knew who he was, and they knew that he would be able to sell such a product, especially with his name attached to it.
To this conversation, marketability in boxing, he isn't top. He sold more grills than he did fights.
People knew the name.
Specific to boxing.
But that's because of boxing, because of his career and what he did. It's really frustrating to...
Yeah, because people are like, well, George Foreman, the heavyweight champion, that's his grill. I'm going to buy that. There you go. See, I got you there.
Anthony Joshua, you know, I'm sure he's promoted some Lucozade Sport, for example. He promotes headphones. What's that? Does that mean he can fight? You know, it makes no sense what they're saying.
No, you didn't. It's almost like banging my head against the wall, this one.
It's so frustrating to listen to that. But here's the thing. You know, I think as much as it was a controversial take, and it might be, I think it is slightly taken out of context, potentially. I think Addy as well is just so wrapped up in the media world right now that maybe it's very hard for him to grasp what it was like in the 80s and 90s. I don't think so. If he was to actually sit down and research this stuff, you know, he'd realize, oh, George Foreman was actually a massive star. You know, I actually did a documentary on my main channel. You guys can check it out after this on his first initial run as heavyweight world champion as a pro, and then as he came back. And you'll see, you know, why people also wanted to watch his fights as well, because he was exciting. He could get knockouts. And I think it's just a very bad take from Adi, and also Emily Eubank is totally discrediting it. And that's the issue with these podcasts. It can expose you in terms of what your actual beliefs are. And fair play to G-Man. He defended George Foreman. And I guess this is where it comes down to everyone, not just Adi, myself as well, that where we all have knowledge gaps within this sport. I would never say I know 100% of everything in this sport. I think I'm very well-rounded. I'm always learning something about a different fighter or that a certain period within boxing all the time. It's a vast history, and especially when we're constantly comparing it to now or the last 20 years instead of the last 60, 70 years. I think that's a big issue within boxing, is that it's like as soon as the 90s happened, people just like seem to forget every single fighter before then almost. I feel. I don't know what you guys think. But yeah, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Adi's opinion. Do you think it was just a terrible take? Do you think it was taken out of context? Once again, I just want to make it clear, I really like Adi. I think he's a great presenter. Like I said, I think we all have probably outrageous opinions. In fact, I've got a great video idea. Make sure to head to my community post after this to see what I'm talking about. As always, this has been Jamie from Boxing Life. I'll see you in the next one.